Hello, my friends. A new love story is beginning. It's like Valentine's Day between American President Donald Trump and President Putin, President of Russia. What's happening today? They talked on the phone for a long time and then they discussed things, and it was a discussion between equals. It was a respectful discussion. For the first time, we see this because remember, since February 2022 and even before that. By the way, what is the European stance? The European stance is we don't talk to Russia. Russia, we're going to destroy it, dismantle it. We arrest Putin like a common criminal, put him in prison, and that's it. That's all. They have a plan. That's the problem, is that with this kind of plan, you're not going to get very far. Because these are fantasy plans. They're plans that someone can come up with when they have the mental age of a 5 or 6-year-old. They're not plans made by serious people. Now, in Europe, specifically Western Europe, since Russia is also part of Europe, in Central and Western Europe, we no longer have serious leaders. Should I tell you the truth myself? I think today, in 2025, we're going to drop the formalities and go further. We're going to start talking more seriously now. The European leaders, the leaders of the United Kingdom, the leader of France, the leader of Germany, are at war with their own countries. I think that from this point on, you always denying, always trying to change my mind, I can set a table, write my name, and say, well, there you go. I think that the French leaders are at war with France, try to change my mind. You'll have a hard time finding arguments, and the arguments you do find will be like spontaneous generation, you know. That means that literally everything that's happening right now is an accident. 40 years of accident, 50 years of accident. And when we, who are all moving in the same direction, who are all heading toward destruction, who are all heading toward betrayal, and then it's just by accident. Let me tell you something. Observe, starting on the 1st of next month, watch for the following. Check something and come back and tell me afterward in this video. You will see that every time there is a decision point, every time we come to a fork in the road, and when there is the possibility to make a decision in the interest of European countries and European peoples, they will systematically make the opposite decision. You'll see, it's never wrong. It's always like that. And it's been going on for just 40 or 50 years. So it's high time, in my opinion, to look at things as they are. Things are what they seem to be, and your elites are at war with you. So as I was saying, there has already been an exchange of goodwill, because yesterday an American was released. He was arrested in 2021. He was a tourist going to Moscow, and he had brought medical cannabis with him. He had a medical prescription, so his doctor had given him a prescription. Except you have to know that in many countries around the world, there is no such concept as medical cannabis. You can't just show up with cannabis and say, my doctor prescribed it to me. That's not possible. For many countries, there is no such thing. So he was considered a trafficker, and he got 14 years. Luckily, there are other countries where he could have lost his head, not just as a figure of speech, but literally. So now he was released. He returned to Washington yesterday. And today, Trump had a long conversation with Putin. And they talked about a lot of things. They talked about values. They talked about history. That they both lost. They fought on the same side during World War II, remember. They each lost many, many men, millions and millions in Russia's case. And then in the end, they want to collaborate, to work together. By the way, even Trump mentioned that he himself visited Moscow one day, and that Vladimir Putin will come to visit Washington, and probably that's something that will happen during this term. It's still an absolutely extraordinary move. They also discussed, of course, that's the main reason for the call, they discussed peace in Ukraine. The problem is that this happened without Europe, without the European countries. So the European countries are going to be the losers in this situation, and this for several reasons. The problem is that they played the role of vassals. They acted as vassals to the Biden administration. The issue is Americans switch administrations frequently, maybe not every 4 years, but you get the idea. They changed administrations. That administration had started a proxy war against Russia using Europe as the battleground. And so that administration is gone. Now today we have another occupant in the White House, and this temporary occupant in the White House decides to do something else. So what is going to happen? Remember, Europe deprived itself of cheap energy coming from Russia. Thank you. It made its industries uncompetitive. Yes, but be careful. This isn't accidental. When we say, for example, that Germany depended on cheap Russian gas, and then that it's thanks to that gas that it was able to build its industry, and that without this gas, it's doomed. So it made a mistake by provoking Russia, and it's the same for the United Kingdom. Yes and no, yes and no. It's true that if we describe things factually, yes, that's true. However, be careful not to go further in the analysis, because if we go further, we might think it's an own goal, that they made a mistake. No, they didn't make a mistake. It was done on purpose. The United Kingdom, for example, France, Germany, they've been trying to get rid of their industries for a long time. They've wanted to move towards net zero for a long time. They've wanted to make binding climate commitments, all of that. They want to destroy comfort at the core, fundamentally. The elites want to destroy it, okay? I'm not in their heads. Why? We can always talk about it. We can always speculate. But the fact is, they want to destroy it. So destroying it by depriving us of cheap Russian energy, why not? It's quick, it speeds things up. So take, for example, and I said this because I said it, because it already happened in the past. We have the French automobile group, for example, that left. We have different groups that left Russia because at some point there was hysteria. We have to leave. We have to leave. They left. Do you know what will replace them? I'll give you one guess. They're going to be replaced by American companies, of course. And the problem is always the vassal. That's the life of a vassal, unfortunately, because the vassal isn't guiding his own destiny, isn't working to get anywhere, isn't actually managing anything, his story, his path. No. The vassal quite simply just endures. He endures. That's it. There's a master in the White House. We go and grovel before him. We do what he wants us to do. And then the day he leaves, we'll be left with nothing. That's exactly what's happening today. So there you have it. The thing is, I was lucky enough to have known my great-grandmother, and she used to say something, a piece of wisdom that's true everywhere, that's true in geopolitics, that's true in personal relationships, in everything. I'll give it to you. I'll share it with you. She used to say, when you argue with someone, leave something for the day when you reconcile, because that's how it works. We argue, we end up at war, all that, but one day there is a reconciliation. So don't overdo it. Don't overdo it. Don't exaggerate now. Just because there's an argument doesn't mean you have to go too far. You see what I mean? To do something irreparable, to go into irreversible territory. But what happened is that Central and Western Europe once again barked so loudly at Russia. It showed such extreme Russophobia that today the cards are being reshuffled. A new reality is setting in. I'm not sure they'll be able to go back. I'm not sure at all that they'll be able to rebuild a relationship. So what's happening is that peace in Ukraine is being made without them to begin with. So we hear about it in the newspapers, on social media, like everyone else. That means they'll find out. Macron will find out what happened when you and I do. He'll find out when he reads about it on Elon Musk's Twitter or Trump's Twitter. It's as simple as that. And then the decisions that will be made won't necessarily take into account French interests or British interests or others. That's it. It'll happen without them. Zelensky will likely be out this year. It's clear he's reached his expiration date. Zelensky is associated with a regime that no longer exists, with Biden's regime, with the Democrats' regime, who actually put him in place themselves in 2014, all of that. So he served for certain things. Today, he no longer has a reason to exist, but be careful. Trump is a businessman. What will he do? He'll do the following. Recently, Zelensky said, referring to a specific amount of 170 billion, he said, we haven't seen it. There's 100 billion missing. We haven't seen them. Do you see what's going on? That means all this money that was supposedly given to Ukraine, a lot of that money didn't actually go to Ukraine. So where is a lot of that money? We don't know. So that's the main point. Much of it is just a money laundering operation for the Democrats. So the money, the checks were signed, shown on television, announced, but in reality, we don't know where the money really went. And that's what Zelensky is saying today. Well, it's easy to talk about money. I was there, I filmed myself with them and all that, but the reality is I didn't see the money. That's the first thing. So part of the money was quietly tucked away, which explains the enthusiasm. When you look, for example, at even just some Hollywood actors, it's not billions they've taken, it's millions, let's say. Angelina Jolie got 20 million to go over there. So you understand these actors who suddenly get excited and suddenly become pro-war and all that, it's because they were paid, actually. They were paid, they took money, they took millions for that. As far as they're concerned, whether Russians or Ukrainians are killed by drones or something else, I mean, that's not their problem. They're there to take millions, then spend them on a house in Los Angeles and on cars, all while flying in private jets, all while talking to you about white privilege and climate. You see their type, that's their life. They urge you to vote for what's good, and you do it because you've been conditioned, becoming a drone. You think you act the way people who don't have the same level of success ask you to, people who take 20 million just to show off in front of some skis. And then the guy, he's on minimum wage, and then he tells you, yeah, they're right, I have to vote the way they told me, so be careful anyway. So as I was saying, that's the first point. Much of the money meant for Ukraine never actually reached Ukraine. That's the first point. Second point, the Americans, when they said to give money to Ukraine for weapons, even the money that was officially received, Ukraine didn't actually get it. Why? Because that money went to the American military industrial complex, the largest employer in the United States. Why? You have to remember one thing. Maybe I'll make a more detailed video on this specific point, but remember, 1929, the American economy collapses. You remember this story, the stock market crash, but it wasn't just the stock market crash on a Friday. It was worse. It lasted for 10 years. Almost until 1939, the United States was facing economic catastrophe. It's like in 2008, but worse. What happened? By 1939, with World War II approaching, the United States escaped the recession through a military-driven economy. Except that in 1945, World War II ends, but the United States continued to fuel a military-industrial complex. Why? Because it provided a lot of jobs. They were job creators. They had factories everywhere, manufacturing plants everywhere. And many Americans, through their paychecks and in their everyday lives, depended on that complex. So it became an important employer. This employer helped them recover from the recession. So in 1945, Americans didn't say, well, the World War is over, let's stop this whole military thing and all that. They continued with the wars. Korea, Vietnam, all that, and closer to us, of course, Iraq, Afghanistan, Ukraine, you get it. It's a system that needs to be constantly fed. So when we told the United States that we're giving money to Ukraine, in reality, it's checks that we're going to sign for the big American military corporations. They're the ones who are going to receive it. And we tell them, here you go. It's a credit. It's a credit we're giving you for Ukraine. Of course, there's overbilling and everything. All the things you know, the kickbacks and all that. And then we tell Ukraine, here you go. You contact this or that group. They have accounts. And then you help yourself. You take what you want. And they were being given expired missiles, old technologies, all that. So things that didn't go very far, but the money was definitely in your lives. So in reality, it's very likely that in the story of the billions given to Ukraine by the United States, it's probable that not a single cent actually left the United States. I'm willing to believe some money did leave France, Germany, or the UK. The vassal doesn't understand this game. It's too cynical and subtle. He sees Americans giving money, so he gives real money, while Americans haven't actually given anything. They pretended to give, but half went to the Democratic Party and the rest to the military or industrial complex. That was it. But then, wait, now we get to the best part. I was telling you that Trump was a businessman, so he knows all that, he sees it, but he thinks differently. What does he say to Ukraine? We gave you 500 billion. I mean, yeah, I don't care that you didn't get them and it went into the whole complex thing. Yeah, I know all that. But you signed for 500 billion, didn't you? They came, you took pictures with them, you thanked them in front of the media, you signed receipts. Yes. Are you happy? Okay. I want my money back. I want my 500 billion. That's it. And so what Trump is now asking Ukraine is to pay him back the 500 billion by saying, you give me land, you give me raw materials, you figure it out. I want my 500 billion. You get the idea. So through Zelensky, right, who was an artist, right, a performer by profession, before coming to power, through, in fact, a coup organized by the previous administration. I think she wasn't there in 2014, but you get what I mean. I'm talking about the Democratic camp. Well, what happened is that now Ukraine will have to carve itself up if necessary to pay back a debt for money it never actually received in reality. So it ends up with thousands of deaths. I say thousands in parentheses. We don't really know how many, because the day we actually start counting the dead, it might turn out we're not talking about thousands, but about millions, about the real massacres that happened in this war. A real bloodbath encouraged and applauded by the previous administration and by Europe, which just wanted it to escalate, to fester, to get worse. I mean, the filthy articles we see in the United Kingdom every day in the media about this war, meaning inflammatory articles just to keep it going. Our previous Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, when he learned that the Russians and the Ukrainians were going to sign a peace agreement in Turkey, he took a plane and rushed over to tell them no, to block the peace agreement because he wanted people dead. He did it for a reason. You know how it works. Quite simply, wars make a lot of people rich. And that's it. There's an interest in making them continue. So that's the story. So now we're in a double, even triple game where there's going to be a peace made without the Europeans at all, because the vassal isn't consulted. There you have it, my friends. Thanks for watching so far. Let me show you my latest book. My latest book is a bit personal, a bit special. It's about overcoming depression. There are autobiographical parts. There are parts where I talk to you about my private life, about people I've known, people I've met. It's also an opportunity, by talking about people, their stories, all that, to go further, to tell certain things, and to unpack the mechanisms of depression a little and give you some insight. I'm not saying that this will pull someone with depression out of it with a capital D, but there are words that some people need to hear, and this book will tell them. Thank you, my friends, for making it this far in the video, and I'll see you in the next one. See you very soon.